Being joined by Penn-Trafford head coach Dan Miller in his 8th year, 7th season for the Warriors. Penn-Trafford comes in as the number 8 seed and gets set to take on the Hampton Talbots later on today. The Warriors 13-6, 7-3 in the section, finishing in second place. And first of all, Coach, we have to congratulate you getting to the playoffs. I'm sure that was one of your goals, and PT is in the WPIAL playoffs pretty much every year. So how did the regular season kind of play out in your eyes, Coach?
Well, first off, on behalf of all of us at Penn-Trafford, I want to thank you for the opportunity to host this interview and thank the Westmoreland Sports Network for what they do for high school baseball. It's exciting to always either be involved in a broadcast or listen to one of your broadcasts. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Coach. I appreciate that.
We're excited again. The regular season is a great time to kind of get things in proper order. But once the playoffs start, that's when the fun starts. That's when the kids become a little bit more lighthearted. Everyone has a little bit more hop in their step. And quite honestly, that's been the expectation. As much as I think we set our goals, and I think a lot of people are very similar where they set their goals for a section championship and then a playoff run and then maybe a WPIAL or state championship, our expectation is to be in those playoffs every year. And this is now our 5th year in a row getting into the playoffs, and we're very proud of that fact.
Coach, you guys received the number 8 seed, and I know most coaches will say it doesn't matter what seed we are, we have to go out and play, but is that kind of what you expected before, thinking about where you would be seated?
Boy, that's a great question. There are so many teams in 5A that are so balanced. When you look at one-loss records, I mean, outside of Peters Township, who has 18 wins, there's a whole host of us that have 13, 14, 15 wins. And I thought just maybe, we might be seated a little bit higher because of our strength of schedule. We had some very good wins versus some very good playoff teams. Norwin obviously is a playoff team every year. Hempfield is a defending WPIAL runner-up. We beat the defending champions in Franklin Regional. We beat a very good York section champion this year. And then we come down to the murderer's row of our season, the last 4 games. We're playing 3 out of 4 teams. We're number 1 teams at the time. So I thought maybe we could have been a little bit higher, but I think the committee does a fair job in trying to get it right.
Now, you guys finished the section schedule with a big doubleheader win over the Latrobe Wildcats, who ended up winning Section 1 5A. And I know you played some really tough games after that, but to be able to finish with a sweep of the section champion, what did that do for your team's confidence?
Well, it certainly gave us a leap of faith, knowing that we beat a team that beat everybody else in the section until they came to play us. And it gave us the opportunity, I think, to really get the motor started and get hot at the right time. I think everybody will tell you want to be hot coming into the playoffs. And I think that just jump-started our hot button here coming into the playoffs.
And in that doubleheader, you guys had contributions from a number of different players. Offensively, Brady Lane had 3 hits and 3 RBIs. Dylan Grabowski also had 3 hits in game 1. And then game 2, you get Tyler Freese had 3 hits. Jake Otto had a really nice game, and really both games. And Grabowski had a huge pitching performance against the Wildcats in game 2 with 10 strikeouts. And again, I know you've played 4 games since then, but how important is it to get contributions from guys up and down the lineup? And is that something that you're expecting heading into the postseason here?
Well, it's a great question because it was huge for us to get those contributions on the offensive side. We had been a team that continues to preach pitching and defense. And we feel very confident if we can hold somebody under 3 runs, we can win a baseball game. It's just that sometimes, especially early in the year, we had trouble scoring 4. So in order to get that extra run, we would had to be creative. But lately, we've been swinging the bats well, and our runs per game average has gone up. So it was big for us to get contributions from everybody, but more importantly, to put more runs on the board rather than just the 3 or 4 we were used to getting.
Now, you mentioned Murderer's Row, and you've played some really good teams since that sweep of Latrobe. You went 2-2, but both losses were to Pine Richland by 1 run and North Allegheny by 2 runs. You had a really good win over Montour, and you mentioned York won a section championship this year, and you beat the Cougars. So how do those games, wins or losses, get you ready for the postseason, playing them right before the playoffs start?
Well, we always want to play the best competition, and I never want to look ahead. But if we take care of business in the first round of the playoffs versus Hampton, we're looking to the number 1 seed at Peters Township, and I really wouldn't want to have it any other way. So to play those games right before we roll into the playoffs, again, at the time we played Montour, they were number 1. North Allegheny was number 1. Pine Richland was a 2. York was a section champion. It benefited us to be able to play those games and play competitive in those games, as opposed to getting a layup and just continuing to pad our 1-loss record. That may have helped us, to your earlier question, in the seeding. If we would have had a few more wins, all of a sudden we're 16, 17 wins. But I think ultimately, for the betterment of the team going into this year, into the playoffs, that was the right call. And we'll continue to play a competitive schedule.
I mentioned Dylan Grabowski earlier, your other top pitcher, Nolan Morasti. Both of those guys pitched very well this year, and that, I guess, presents a challenge for you and the coaching staff on who you go to in game 1. I won't ask you. I know you're not going to unveil who you're going to go to, but talk about the way those guys threw this year. And I know it's a team effort. There's other guys out of the bullpen as well, but just the way they threw in section play, and I guess the challenge that lies ahead to see who you're going to go with later today.
Well, you can certainly ask, but I won't
Coach,
tell.
who will you go with later today?
Listen, I'll let you know first pitch.
Okay, sounds good.
We discussed that today after practice as a staff, and we brought Dylan Grabowski into the room. We brought Nolan Morasti into the room, and we brought Evan Del Signor into the room as well. Grabowski and Morasti have both pitched about 40 innings this year. Del Signor's probably pitched about 27 or 28, but he was very good against North Allegheny in keeping them to 2 runs and pitching a full 7-inning game. So I think it was fair to them as the leader of this program to bring them in and communicate, because they all want to know. So when we bring them in to talk to them, we want them to know what we're thinking as a staff and where we see them for this first round of the playoffs. And the answer, quite honestly, is I told them all to be ready.
That's right.
We want them all to be ready. We don't know what's going to happen, but all 3 of them are very close, not only as teammates, but in competitiveness. Morasti's a bulldog. He wants the ball all the time. He's a guy that's going to pitch with a chip on his shoulder. His last big playoff game, we threw him to the Wolves against West Allegheny last year. He gave up 5 runs, and we thought we were just going to get pummeled, only to lose on a walk-off walk in the bottom of the 7th. So he's a guy that wants the ball. Grabowski is a guy that continues to be hot. He's a big game pitcher for us. So we got 2 big game pitchers, and we've got a guy that we've groomed in Del Signor that I think is not afraid to take the mound either. We feel very confident behind all 3 of them.
And now that we're talking about pitchers, I wanted to get your opinion, Coach, on, you've had a chance to look at it now for a couple of years with the section games now being played on consecutive days. Of course, rain kind of changes that every once in a while, but is that something that you like from what the WPIAL changed in the schedule a couple of years ago?
Yeah, I think it's more real baseball. It gives us an opportunity as coaches to challenge ourselves as far as strategy. And then again, when weather has certainly played a factor in it for us this year, especially early in the year with all the rain outs, but we're fortunate that we do have a deep staff. So you can ask me that every year. And as long as we have a deep staff, I'll tell you, I love it. If we're thin, I'm going to tell you, let's stretch those games out a little bit.
Right. Coach, who are maybe a couple of guys that have really stepped up for you this year from the beginning of the year until now that you've seen really mature and maybe have their game go from, down here to up here by the end of the season now in the playoffs?
Well, I think I'll start with our young guys, because we were a very young team last year that finished 13-7. When you look at us this year, we're almost identical. We have the same group of guys. We finished 13-6. But hopefully we can get a little bit deeper into the playoffs. But it starts with the young guys. And we carried some sophomores this year that I don't think we're expecting to play much, and either by someone else's misfortune or by their own talent, they were thrown into the game. One of them is Ian Temple, our catcher. Ian Temple was probably projected to be a utility player for us. His primary position is a catcher. But our starting catcher and all-conference catcher last year in 2021, Jacob Haynes, was hurt playing high school football in the state championship game. And unfortunately, he hasn't been back yet. but Ian Temple has been more than serviceable. So he's a guy that has stepped up as a young sophomore to catch 19 games for us without a break. We have another young infielder who's a sophomore, and Brody Hoffman. Every time Grabowski pitches, Brody Hoffman plays second base. So he's gotten a lot of work defensively every time Grabowski takes the mound, and he's done more than admirable filling in at second base when Grabowski's on the mound. And then I continue to go up the middle when you go from Temple to Brody Hoffman to Jason Sable. I wanted to say Jordan Sable, but Jordan was the older brother.
Right.
Jason Sable in center field, who came to us halfway through the year last year as a freshman, is now matured and only playing as a sophomore. So we had three guys up the middle that were sophomores that have done very well and contributed, whether it was offensively, defensively, or just held their own. But also, too, I will tell you, one of the guys that has stepped up for us this year is Brady Lane. Brady Lane, we've worked him at first base last year, told him throughout the summer that he probably ought to continue to work at first base because we have a very competitive middle infield in Grabowski and Otto. And Brady Lane has accepted that role and has done very well at first base for us.
Coach, you obviously know what it takes to get to a WPIAL championship game, doing so a couple of years ago. And of course, we think fondly back on that time when McLean Mon was leading you there, and just what a competitor and what kind of kid that he was. But what does it take to get to a WPIAL championship game? I know you're taking it game by game, but what will it take for your team to compete for one this year?
Well, certainly thank you for referencing McLean. We all miss McLean Mond. His spirit continues to live with our program through his competitive nature, and those are some of the things that you can't teach. For us to continue to be a championship caliber team, it starts with structure. Our staff does a great job in providing structure with all of our practice plans, and then it continues with accountability, and we ask all of our players to be accountable, to know every day what we're going to work on and what we're going to practice. And then after that, it becomes disciplined and being good, disciplined baseball players. Coupled with the fact that playing good at the right time certainly is a part of that recipe for success as well. So, but I think for us, it really starts with the word team. We want to take every player that we have on our roster and emphasize to them that this is all about team. And if they continue to keep that in mind, and there's ebbs and flows, as you know, during the course of a ball game, during the course of a season. But I think they all know that everything that we do is all about the team comes first.
And Coach, finally, we'll wrap up the interview talking about your first round opponent, the Hampton Talbots. What do you know about them? What have you been able to kind of, scout when you've been looking at Hampton?
Yeah, Hampton is an interesting matchup for us because I believe they come in as a very hungry group. They have played a very competitive schedule, much like us as far as non-conference, playing a bunch of 6A schools. They've played the North Alleghenies, the Seneca Valleys, the Butlers, Upper St. Clair. So they're battle tested. I think they come in also to maybe a little bit hungry because they've lost 5 of their last 6, and they got bounced in the playoffs last year by a very good West Allegheny team. So I'm expecting them to come in with a chip on their shoulder and ready to play playoff baseball.
Coach, it's always great talking baseball with you. Thanks again for your kind comments at the beginning of the interview, and go Warriors. Good luck.
Okay. Thanks, Dan, for having us. And on behalf of all of us at Penn-Trafford School District, we appreciate what Westmoreland Sports Network does. Thank you.
Thanks, Coach.